Okay, so in this demo, we're going to go over how to create a master material setup for your scene. So the reason we want to do this is it gives us a lot of control over our material and allows us to add controls and update our material throughout the process, which will in turn update all of our instances. So we're going to make a master material, and then we will make instances of our master material to apply to all of our meshes in our scene. So to begin, we make ourselves a material, call it master mat underscore, it's just a demo. And I like to add like an underscore at the beginning of it so that it shows up at the front of our list because you'll want to have easy access to it. So let's open that up and bring it over here, maybe. Hold on. There it is. Now we have our master material with our empty node. So to start, we're going to have this master material give us control over 4 different maps. So we're going to go ahead and make a texture sample node. We're going to go ahead and make 4 of these. And then we want to have control of these in our instance. So we're going to go ahead and right click on them and convert them to parameters. And then we'll name each one according to the map we'll input into it. So for this first one, we'll call it color map. Convert to parameter. We'll call this metallic map. This one will be roughness map. And this one will be normal map. So depending on the maps you're using, these inputs will change, but this color, metallic, roughness, and normal map is a good base setup. So just so everything works properly, I'm going to go ahead in each of these nodes and then go over to the details panel. Then down at the bottom where it says color map, I'm going to go ahead and input some textures. So I'm going to go to my textures folder and I'm going to use these guys because I have them prepared already. So I'm going to grab my, let me go ahead and put this content browser over here just for easy access. Go ahead and put in my color map, put in my metallic map, put in my roughness map, and finally put in my normal map. So now if we hook all these up to their corresponding outputs and save, and then if we go back to our content browser and we right click and make an instance of our master material, if we open it up, rearrange the windows a bit. Now we got this is our instance, this is our master. If we go to the instance, we'll see that all 4 of those maps are available to edit. So if we wanted to change the color map, we just turn it on, and then we can go ahead and change that. So on a base level, this is kind of how the master instance relationship works. We have set up all our controls in the master material, then we make instances, put them on models, and then we can access all the parameters we need here in a nice clean fashion so we don't have to recreate this every time. But what we can do now is we can create a series of controls to control different aspects of our textures or different aspects of the material in general. So the first thing I want to add is controls for the UVs. Basically, controls to multiply the or repeat the texture in the X or Y direction or the U and V direction. So to make that control, we start off with a texture coordinate node, and we're gonna search mask, get a component mask. Then we're going to need two of those, two component masks. The first one, we're just going to go over in details and just have the red channel selected. The other one, we're just going to have the green channel selected. So this will mask out the X and the Y direction. Then for each one, we're going to multiply them. We're going to multiply them by a value. And to get a little value node, just hold 1 on the keyboard and then click anywhere, and then you'll get a value. And then we want to turn this into a parameter. We're going to call this U multiplier. And we're going to default it to 1, so that by default, nothing changes. So we'll plug that into B. And then we want the same setup on the G mask. So we can just copy and paste it. Put it into multiply. Make sure we rename the new parameter to V. Then we mask them out. Now we got to combine them back together. So we can do that using a append vector node. Combine them back together. And then finally, we want one more control, one more multiply node, and one more parameter to give ourselves a global multiplier. So we'll convert this to a parameter and we'll call this UV global multiplier. So I'm calling it UV because that's just what I'm used to. But if it makes more sense, you could replace U with X and V with Y because you're multiplying it in the X direction or the Y direction. And then this is just a global multiplier, so it'll basically do the work of both of these at once. So now we have our set of controls to control the UVs. Now, if we have a like set of controls, they all kind of work together, do the same thing, we can highlight them all and then press C, as in cat, on the keyboard, which will frame them. Then I can call this UV controls. And that way we can easily move this around. So after that's created, we need to plug the output of it into the UV channel of each of our textures. So if we save this now and go to our instance, we'll see that up here we have U, V, and a global multiplier controls. So next thing I like to do is give myself some level of image adjustments within each or for each of the maps. That way, if I want to make some basic changes to my texture, adjust the brightness, adjust the roughness levels, adjust the metallic levels, I can do that right in the material instead of having to go back to my texturing program or wherever I made the textures and adjust it there. Just lets you do some on-the-fly editing. So the first set we're going to do is with the color map. We're going to go ahead and start by pulling off another multiply node. We're going to make another value here by holding 1, pressing anywhere. Convert to parameter. We're going to call this brightness. We'll set the default to 1. Plug that into multiply. Next, we'll pull off the multiply. And we're going to grab a desaturation node. Add another value. We can leave it at 1 or at 0. Can convert it. Call this saturation. And then finally, off of the desaturation, we'll grab a hue shift node. And then we'll put the desaturation into the texture output. And then we'll grab another parameter. Convert to parameter, call it hue. and set the default to 1. And now we have our color map that we can change on the fly, and then we have a couple image controls. We can adjust the brightness, the saturation, and the hue. So let's go ahead and kind of group these up a little closer. And then of course, go to the end, grab the output, plug that into our base color, and then we'll go ahead and press C, highlight them all, press C to group them together. Call this color. So now we got all the controls for the color map grouped together. So next, for the metallic map, we're just going to have one control, which just lets us adjust how metallic it is. So for this, we'll drag off a subtract node. We'll add a value, convert to parameter, call this middleness. We'll let it default to 0 because we don't want to subtract anything by default. And then we'll put the output into the metallic. Next, for roughness, pull out a value. We'll add node, make another value, convert to parameter, call this roughness, put into the B of the add. We don't want to add anything by default, and then take the output, put in the roughness. So now we got our metallic map with one control and a roughness map with one control. And then, like everything else, we can go ahead and group these together with our little frames here, just to keep ourselves organized. So last, for the normal map, this one's a little different. We're going to pull out the node, and we're going to add a linear interpolate mode under math. And then we'll have the texture plugged into the B value. And then in the A value, we're going to hold 3 on the keyboard and click to make a color vector node. Double click it to open it up. Set the blue value to 1. Press OK. Drag that into the A. And then the alpha will make another single value. Plug that into the alpha. Convert to parameter. Call it normal intensity. And set the default to 1. And then we will put this output in a normal map. Group it up, normal. And there we go. So if we save this, have a look at our instance, you'll see all sorts of controls up here that you can turn on and play around with as you desire. So the last set of controls I want to add are basically, we're going to make a little switch that will allow us to toggle between using a texture map or just using a solid color or uniform value for any of these given inputs. So to get that started, we need a switch, a static switch parameter. And then right when we add it in, it'll let us rename it. And I'll call this use uniform color. It's fun to just phrase it as a question so you're pretty clear what it's doing. So when this will appear in our instance as just a little checkbox, and we can set it to what's the default. So if it's unchecked, so it's not true, we're just going to use the color map. But if it's true, we want to use a uniform color. So we'll press 3 on the keyboard and click anywhere, make a color. We'll just set this default to red just so it's very clear that we're using it. Oh, red, up the saturation, okay. Put this in the true. Take our new output, plug it in. we can just grab the edges of the box to incorporate any new stuff we add. So now, if we save, we can have a look at how this works. If I go to the master material, by default, we have access to a color map. But here, we see use uniform color. And if we check that on, and then check this box, it will get rid of that texture, and then it'll use the uniform color for the color input. Now, obviously we want to have control over what that color is, so what we forgot to do was convert this color right here into a parameter. So we'll call this uniform color. If we save it, have a look. Now we have a uniform color and we have a uniform color control down here. So we're going to do that same procedure for all of our other textures. Basically just giving us the option if we want to use a uniform value instead of a map. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this, copy paste, select it, copy paste, change the name, use uniform instead of color. For this one we'll have uniform metallic, and then paste another one. This one will be use uniform roughness, and then for this one use uniform normal. Cool. So now we got all these switches we're going to hook up. So for the metal map, we'll put this into the false. Into the true, we just need a basic value, and we'll set the default to 1. And then we want to control it, so we'll make it into a parameter. Call this uniform metallic, or metalness, or whatever makes sense for you. Plug the output into as the new metallic. Same thing for the roughness. Put this into the false, into the true. We want a value. We'll also set the default to 1. Convert it to a parameter. Call it uniform roughness. And then put this into the roughness. And finally, we'll put the false into the true. We'll just copy this color node here, put that into the true. And we don't really need to have adjustment for that, because when there's no normal map, it just kind of is as it is. So we'll put this into the normal. And then we will, just for cleanliness, go ahead and extend out our little boxes just to encompass our new controls. And now we save. And now in your master material, you should have a switch for all of your controls to swap between using a texture map and a uniform value. So if I turn all these on and switch these all on, we will have uniform values that we can control to just make a nice default material. So the reason I wanted to have those controls is now, if I make sure this is saved, this is pretty much done. We could add more functionality as need be, case per case. But now what I can do is I can look at my scene. I can say, okay, maybe I get my textures for my rocks finished. I can make an instance of my new material. I can plug in all my maps and set the material up. But if I am working on these walls and I just want them to have like a default, I just want to give them a color just to start thinking about, I can instead make an instance, switch our little toggles to use uniform values, make a simple colored material, and put that on our mesh. So that's the process of making a master material and using it with material instances to control your scene.